Hello! Hello everyone! Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Eric Galina and I am about to join in with my friend and guest Sasha Selipanov. And here he is! Hello!
Hey guys.
Hey!
Awesome.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy we finally made this happen. I mean, we've been trying to plan this for a little while now, and I'm super stoked that we could finally coordinate a time that fit your schedule and mine, and here we are.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So obviously, I think most of the people know you. If they're tuning into this and they're watching this live stream, they know about you, or I mean, you're pretty well known anyway, especially in the Instagram community here. And but I'll just give a kind of a brief synopsis of your life, if you'll allow me to do that.
All right.
And then you can fill in the blanks, or essentially tell me anything that I may have missed out, perhaps. So I know that you went to, first of all, you were born in Georgia, and then you grew up in Russia, right?
That's right.
And then you went to Art Center. Now, I guess if I'm going that far back, I really want to know, in Georgia and in Russia, how did you kind of get bitten by the design bug? Like, what made you want to get into becoming an automotive designer to begin with?
I guess just liking cars a lot. My first word as a toddler was car.
Yeah?
So yeah, I was just always in love with cars. There was a brief period when I was very attracted to jet fighters as well, but then Soviet Union falling apart and all kinds of mini wars starting around me. And as a kid, I was disillusioned in weapons and anything that had to do with military. So I switched gladly back to my car obsession and forgot all about jet fighters at that point.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you're like me. You're a car guy. I mean, you and I just love being in a car, just the senses that I have, just being in that environment and being in control of that moving object, right? And somebody told me a long time ago, there's no better view than the one through a windshield. And this was a color and trim designer that was working at Fisker at the time. I think this was years ago, back when it was Fisker, and she told me that, and it's so true. I mean, so right now you are in your lobby, basically, aren't you? In your design studio at Koenigsegg.
Yeah, I'm sitting in the lobby because obviously I can't bring the camera into the more secret part of the building. But let me show you around real quick. All right?
Yes, please. Yes, I'd appreciate that.
Right. So this is our lobby. We have our Jesko engine here. We have a full-size Gemera model.
Nice.
Sitting in the lobby as well.
Cool.
We have the Jesko Absolute.
Nice.
The high-speed variant of the Jesko. And a couple of scale models and prints and some shirts and other stuff. But yeah, this is our lobby.
Very cool. Very cool. So basically this kind of brings me back to my intro, if you will. Like, I know that you went to Art Center. I know that you interned then at Mazda, right? And then you started working at VW, and then from VW you went and did projects on supercars and hypercars. You worked on the Huracan, then you went and worked on the Chiron for Bugatti. Bugatti brought you on board, I think, in 2014. They made it official, saying that you were their head of exterior design creative development. You worked with a lot of people over the course of your life, in your career. What was, how is it different? Because obviously then you went to Hyundai and worked at Genesis and did the Essentia and the Mint as well. Very different cars. So besides like the obvious typology difference in going from creating a Bugatti to creating a I would say premium model like vehicle for a Korean brand. I mean, talk to me a little bit about the differences between these three kind of areas, if you will, of you were working for VW, massive company, German company. You went to work for another massive company in a smaller, studio in Germany. It's still a massive company and a Korean one. To now this
Guys,
small
quick
company.
quick break. My guys have just arrived. Our team has
There we
arrived.
go.
I want to introduce them to
Yes.
everyone here.
Let's
I'm
do
gonna
that.
switch sides. 1 second. I need to also change somehow the volume on this thing.
Aha.
All right.
Hi guys.
Here's the mafia. Here's the mafia.
Nice.
So Shakira, Giulio, Marcello, and Essa, all Italian team.
Wow. All Italian. Nice.
Except this guy.
Yes, except that guy, the big guy, the tall guy.
That's right. I'm
Very
trying to
cool.
see how I can switch the audio so they can hear you because it's in my.
Just unplug that.
Right. So
Okay. Nice one.
Hi. Hello.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Eric.
Hello, hello. Nice to put faces
Really
and
good,
names,
thanks.
by the way. Because I feel like I know some of you guys, but I don't. But no, it's really good to see you guys. So tell me a little bit about what you guys do. Like each one of you has a role, and this is the entire design team, if I'm not mistaken. You guys are super compact and tight knit.
Chris. Stairs? No.
Good. So we're missing one guy.
We're missing
Yeah,
one guy.
apparently. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me, let's start with you, sir. What's your role?
So I guess, well, I mean, we kind of have like mixed roles. We quite wear a lot of. I guess it's a bit different than regular design studios. We do exterior and interior, and at the same time we do a lot of alias and sketching all at once. So it's not really necessarily like one interior person or one exterior person or one detail person like in some other studios it tends to be, which is what I find to be really fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess.
Nice.
We
Okay.
don't really have much of a job differentiation between modeling, designing, animating, rendering. Everybody does everything. So
Yeah.
Okay.
we're-
So that's one fundamental change probably from the last places you worked in.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I mean, do you guys have like a preference, or are you more kind of skilled in one area, or do you like just take it as it comes, like whatever project needs doing, you kind of do it?
Yeah, well, we try to support each other in the team.
Yeah.
In any field. So there's no like a specific thing like that we will not do.
Mm-hmm.
We're not fussy, so we go straight to the point in each type of field that is required. So yeah, that's basically our goal. Yep.
Nice. And what's your background? Where were you before? Before joining Sasha?
Currently here I'm before I was working in Honda for 3 years in Tokyo, Japan.
Okay.
And previously I was in Jaguar Advanced Design again for 3 years, and
Wow.
then Ferrari, and then Bertone for 4 years and a half.
Okay.
So that's basically my background. Yeah.
Nice.
And
Nice.
I'm currently here as a design manager in a team. Very fresh actually, and super excited.
Nice. Well,
Can I ask a
welcome.
question
Welcome.
for Essa? Essa was head of exterior at Genesis.
Yes. I heard. Yeah. Essa, how tall are you, man? You're like 7 feet tall or what?
Very fast.
How tall are
He
you,
made a
Essa?
huge career.
How tall?
How tall are you? Are you 7 feet tall? No, that's awesome, man. And you're
also-
Swedish, right? Essa,
forgot
am I
to
right? Are you Swedish?
No,
No, I'm Finnish.
he's
You're
French.
Finnish, right? Sorry. Cool. Nice one. Well,
So
no,
we also
I've seen your
have
work,
Chris.
man. It's good stuff. This is Chris. Hello, Chris. I'm Eric.
Right. Hey,
Nice to meet you.
Eric, was it?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So you're not Italian, are
So
you?
yeah,
No, I'm from Detroit.
Oh, right on. Okay, nice. Nice to meet you. Good stuff. And so you have one
where
girl
you
on
guys
your
located?
team then, am I right,
UK.
Sasha? One girl?
We have a girl, yes.
And hello, I didn't get your name, sorry.
Hello. Shakira.
So, very nice to meet you. So you
Thank you.
also do everything just like the guys.
Yes, yes,
Absolutely.
exactly.
That's
Everything
amazing.
is mixed, so yeah.
Very cool, very cool. And your background is Ferrari and stuff as well, or where did you come from?
No, I was still in cars, so I was working in a Land Rover, Bertone, other car design studios in Italy. I come from like multiple places, like with different cars. So from supercars to production cars.
Very nice, very nice, great. Well, it's super cool to meet all of you guys. I mean, you're a small team, so it's great to have you all there, and I'm able to like see everyone. And it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you all virtually like this. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to. It's great to put a face to a name, but hopefully, we'll get a chance to actually shake hands one day.
Yes. Yeah.
After
But
Corona.
until then, keep up the good work.
All right.
Oh man, you guys are great. Keep up the good work.
Thank you,
Thanks.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Harry.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye,
Bye.
guys. So that was good. No, that was good. So we got to see a bit of your team, and I mean, right away, that kind of answers part of my question, right? I mean, you were working for this massive, super like automotive giant, and I mean, your team at Hyundai couldn't have been that big, though, was it? I mean, when you were at Genesis.
No, we were just 7, 8 people.
Okay. So it's still pretty compact. But in terms of company culture, I mean, I kind of know the answer to this already because you're working for Christian on Koenigsegg, right? His name's on the door. So there's probably a bit of that. But I want to hear it from you. Like, what is, like, in your experience, would you say was the fundamental difference going from Bugatti, that's quite small, to Genesis, that was quite small, to now Koenigsegg?
Well, I think each one of those companies as a place to work was great to me, and I learned a lot when I was there. In fact, obviously some ups and downs in my career, but overall I wouldn't change a thing. So I'm really happy that I had those opportunities. But switching now at this stage in my career to a smaller car company like Koenigsegg is amazing because I get to finally apply everything I learned, but I also get to learn so much more from the neighboring branches. So from engineering, manufacturing, marketing, sales, everything is happening under the same roof. Everything is happening live, and you are not in your box anymore. You're not just a designer responsible for design. Your opinion counts when it comes to every little thing. And it's just great to be there, to share your thoughts, to listen to people who've been doing that for a living for ages and learn from them. And I have to say, like with Chris, for example, we're working on interior of the Gemera right now, some production work, but we've started going into engineering, and we're actually doing a lot of engineering bits in design, which is unheard of for a conventional car designer to work on those types of things. And the founder of the company encourages this kind of cross discipline collaboration to a point where, if you have a brain, it's your brain that counts, not necessarily your job title. You just apply your good thinking to any bit of the car that you see in front of you and improve it.
Absolutely. No, but that definitely allows a lot of scope for you to develop, personally. I mean, not only in terms of skill set, but, if you're constantly learning, it keeps you on your toes. It's really great. No, that's amazing.
It's amazing. It's really great. And another point is the speed of decision making is unprecedented. You just, you have a question or you have an idea. You don't have to wait for the next meeting or the next appointment or the next board member, whatever level discussion. You just go into the office and you say, I have a thought, I have an idea. How about this? And you get right away a good answer why it's possible or not. And more often than not, it's possible.
Yeah.
So just amazing.
No, definitely. I mean, but it's also what enabled you really to create this the Gemera in such a record amount of time because it's like I know you joined. So you joined Koenigsegg in October 2019. So you haven't even been there a year, and you've already got a full car like done and out the door. It's like, was that a running prototype when it was in Geneva?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got a running prototype. I mean, I know you didn't start it from scratch, right? But still, design and done in less than 5 months.
I would say
That
like
is,
this. I would say like this. Everything, including glass, is new on the car, but proportions and architecture and the wheelbase, wheel size, those sort of things were determined before I joined. But for
yeah.
example, belt line and the actual, how do I say, geometry of the bodies, our work, exterior, interior.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I've seen pictures of it. It was rather like, a bit ungainly, I would say, in terms of the roof height and the way that the glass was in the beginning, certainly when you first joined. But that's why I guess Christian brought you on board, isn't it?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, he's very happy. He's very happy with what we achieved. It
I
was
don't doubt it. Yeah,
incredibly fast, and at that time, I also didn't have my team in place. So the guys joined very recently. Marcello was here, but he was on a YESCO Absolute program. So the Gemera was basically in my hands, and I had Arseni and Etienne helping me out a lot, basically as freelancers.
yeah.
And it was just myself and two of my good friends just putting together what we know how to do best, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, you had the core, the foundation, right? You had the package. And then ultimately, there was a lot of things. I know that we had that conversation where you basically just finessed the design. You changed a bit of lights, the belt line, for example, the reflections and things, and cleaned up the lines. But still, it's a remarkable achievement to come to a finished car in that amount of time. So you must have really worked heavy on that. But anyway, congratulations! It's an amazing car.
Thank
I
you.
know, a lot of people here are commenting. There's one guy saying Gemera is love. It's like, a lot of these guys are really infatuated by this car, which is really groundbreaking as well. I mean, it's a full. Yeah, please do ask questions. Somebody just asked if he's allowed. If you can ask your questions, put them into the little question box so I can figure them out and pick them out, actually. But yeah, definitely taking questions. But before we get to those questions, I want to, obviously the Gemera, is a great product. You can read more about it on Form Trends. I've got like a huge story up there. But there's a lot more about that I want to discuss, about your role within Koenigsegg. And, obviously everybody that knows Form Trends knows that I like cars, I love cars, but I also like the people that are in the business. And so I like to find out a little bit more about what makes these people that are creating the projects tick. And so from your perspective, going and joining Koenigsegg after your stint in Hyundai and VW, Bugatti, Lambo, Genesis, and all the rest. One thing that a lot of the publications that published the press release about you joining Koenigsegg didn't actually go into much detail about what I thought was a pretty big deal and probably a huge selling point from your perspective. I don't know, maybe not, you tell me, is the fact that you are managing director of the Raw Design House. So tell me a little bit more about Raw Design House and tell me how that fits into the Koenigsegg brand of companies.
Yeah, so it was not the main reason for my joining, obviously. The main reason for my joining the company is the fact that I'm a huge fan of Koenigsegg and what Christian and his team here have done over the years. The first time I wrote an email to Christian was 2004, and I asked if there was a chance to join him right after school, and he said at that time, no, we're not looking to hire designers yet. We're not in a position. Maybe our paths will cross down the line. So they did cross something like 15 years later. But I've always kept it as a dream for myself to become a designer here one day. The Raw Design House was an interesting idea that Christian had. He said, you know what, you're going to bring a bunch of talent on board and you have a lot of skill yourself. Can we market that? Can we actually open doors to interesting clients? I have a few people who've asked for help on design, and could we have them as clients? I said, that sounds fascinating. I'm very happy to work on hypercars, but I'm also happy to branch out and do other things as well. And there might be a client that has a hypercar project coming on board. There might be a client that has a city bus project coming on board. I'm happy to try everything. My main passion is very much sports cars and high performance cars, but the skill set and the talent of our team can be applied upon a multitude of other things as well. So Raw Design House is effectively a external facing part of the design studio, whereby we have a separate workflow, separate facility, separate network, etc., to make sure that there is confidentiality and to work on projects for external clients, which we already do have in the team right now. So I'm happy to say the first few months of Raw Design House's existence have been very fruitful.
Okay, no, that's great. Really, really positive to hear, especially in this current climate, right? So, I mean, just to bring you back then a little bit, you were talking mostly transportation and automotive-based projects. Is that pretty much the way that it's going to stay, or do you? Because I've had a lot of conversations with other people, like I spoke with a couple of guys on this live stream in the past, where it's the core business is automotive, and they're not going to stray from that. So obviously you have that with Koenigsegg, but it's really actually quite different as well, which is something I'm going to get into a little bit later. But there's room for expansion, right? I mean, we've seen it within Ital Design, for example, with Volkswagen. We've seen it across a number of different brands where they used to just do cars, or Giugiaro did a lot of things during Ital Design, so perhaps that's not the best example. But is there room basically to diversify outside of the automotive sphere or the transportation sphere, or do you really want to keep it consulting, engineering, design based in terms of automotive?
I think our core expertise is definitely automotive, and this is where we have unparalleled wealth of knowledge, know-how, and talent, I think, in our team. So that's our core area of expertise. However, if a project comes in which is not strictly automotive, but we see some carryover of know-how or technology or skill, then we will be happy to tackle it as well. But having said that, like if I see a badly designed car, it hurts me so much that I physically suffer. If I see a badly designed chair, I feel like, well, that was an ugly chair, or whatever. Like my life goes on. I don't take the offense personally as much as I do with a car. So that also shows that I guess the application of our skill set towards cars is very personal, and that same skill set can be applied to chairs. I have no doubt that we could probably make a well streamlined, beautiful, lightweight, easy to produce, manufacture, repair chair,
Right,
depending
right.
on the values of the brand. But that level of personal engagement where something truly hurts if it's bad, I don't know if I could have that with an object that is not a car.
Right. No, I feel you. And okay, so no, that's great. And that kind of brings me to another question I wanted to ask you, which is, the auto industry is going through such a big change, right? The Gemera could not have been created 10 years ago when Christian originally had that original idea. Or was it 15 years ago, whenever he had the original idea to create a 4-seat car? Because
19.
it would have been too long. It would have been like, in terms of packaging, you just couldn't fit a V8 engine in something like that with 4 passengers, right? So technology has really helped move and propel things forward. So, when we're talking now in terms of what's happening in the auto industry, shared mobility, electrification, and autonomy, perhaps for Volkswagen, who the people's car, right, creates the car as a commodity, the car as a tool to kind of get around and move around. You are clearly, with Koenigsegg, on the other side of the spectrum, creating very emotional hypercars, not, something that anyone would really need. So how do you, you want it, but it's like, I want a Rolex, but I can get by with a Casio, you know what I mean? So it's like, if where do you kind of see the future going with all of these things? Like, will Koenigsegg be affected? I mean, I know you guys are a low volume manufacturer, so perhaps emissions requirements and all the rest doesn't force you to go down that route. But what's your answer?
It's a very big question with many different facets to it. But first of all, we as a company, we believe in having as much performance and as much fun as possible, but doing it responsibly. So as Christian puts it, we're energy agnostic. That means that we solve the equation of what propels our cars individually for each car that we produce. And there's nothing that prevents us from doing a fully electric car, or you name it, whatever comes on as an idea, catches on as an idea. We do take environmental impact, sustainability, and all those issues very seriously here at Koenigsegg. This is not a brand that prides itself on gas guzzling. So frugal engines. The Gemera has a 1,000-kilometer range and is by far the lightest vehicle of this level of performance. So if it were a full electric car, it would be far heavier, and that would be less efficient in a way. So we live in today's world, and we look at the future, and we're definitely not some kind of an old-fashioned dinosaur of a brand. Far from it. It's in my opinion the most innovative building and a group of engineers in the world. That's how I see this company and our mission statement. But with your question about electrification and the car as a commodity and all those things, let's see how it plays out. I'm a very big skeptic that a car can become a commodity and stay a, let's say, product that has premium values attached to it. Because once something becomes commoditized, you don't care who provides your electricity as long as the juice is coming out of the plug in the wall. You're not going to opt for the premium electricity plan as long as it's the same electricity that comes through the plug. So there's going to be a race to the bottom when commodity becomes, when cars become a commodity, race to the bottom. And the parties that will benefit from this race to the bottom are not the manufacturers of the cars, but the actual infrastructure providers, like software giants, etc. So I see car companies that follow the car as a commodity mindset as taking a huge risk.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to say they're doomed, because I definitely don't wish that upon anyone. But I think if you bet your money on car as a commodity, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
What's the incentive to buy premium? What's the incentive to order a more expensive interior trim or a more expensive headlight LED assembly? Car companies make money off of those. They don't make money off of bare bones cars. Those are basically sold at a loss. So once the incentive to put laser lights and Alcantara is gone, where is the profit going to come from? Anyway, that's their problem, not ours necessarily. So I don't believe that cars will become a commodity. That's just to answer that part of your question.
Okay.
What else was there?
Well, I mean, in terms of you're now on this very emotional trajectory with hypercars, right? It's not, so I mean, if you don't foresee, the car becoming a commodity, certainly not from a Koenigsegg perspective, right? Because there's so much demand for limited edition, or at least there was before the pandemic, and there probably will be moving forward in terms of individual identity and creating things that not many other people have. Again, that's the whole Rolex versus Casio thing. But there's also, as another part to that question, I suppose, there's and this is something that I also wanted to talk to you about, because I recently saw a picture of an image of the Polestar Precept back to back with the Koenigsegg Gemera. And what's going on there? That's extremely interesting.
I have no idea. I have no clue.
Well, the way that I read into it, I really do want to hear your answer, because I know you know a little something.
I have no
but
idea.
The way I read into it,
I'm gonna let our marketing department handle that question.
Okay, so you're not willing to answer that and go down that route at all.
No. There's there's a developing story, and it's an exciting little thing we did. So let them tell their story. I'm here to talk about design.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, I know they did a partnership with Cake recently, so it could be something along those lines. But where I'm going is, in this automotive industry, like the global, not just design, but in the automotive industry, there's a lot of proprietary, things going on, a lot of secrecy, a lot of, this was developed in-house by us. I think if we were to do some type of, sharing of platforms, for example, that could certainly help from a bottom line efficiency perspective anyway, in terms of if you were to share some of the technology that you're developing with Polestar and likewise, I think there's definite synergy there, right? I mean, you guys are working on two different sides of, but you're both Swedish companies, you're both producing vehicles, and they're fitting in different areas. But what do you think about that bit?
Well, I'm not going to elaborate on the Polestar story because, like I said, that's something that our marketing department will handle themselves. But
More generally speaking,
I will tell you something. I think that for mainstream cars, I think we discussed this once already. The peak optimization has somewhat arrived. I mean, if you think
absolutely.
about how different architecturally a BMW 3 Series was from an Audi A4 4 generations ago, they were quite different. 3 Series was a rear-wheel drive car, longitudinal engine. A4 used to have a transverse engine, front-wheel drive. A4 had much more roomy interiors, but the 3 Series had the driver dynamics, etc. So there was a lot of difference. But it's the same market that drives development for both companies. So the BMW marketing wanted a roomier interior, and the Audi marketing wanted a sportier car. And what do we have now? We have two four-wheel drive cars, effectively, with a slight bias towards the rear, slight bias towards the front, but not really. Engines are longitudinal. The one bank of cylinders is in front of the axle, two banks behind. Doesn't matter. It's almost the same package at this point in time. They've lost their architectural uniqueness, and that's because a car has 120 years of history behind it. These engineering solutions are tried and tested, and market demand combined with, let's say, lack of creativity in terms of how we position and sell our products means there is convergence. There's a lot of convergence.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody comes up and says, you know what, I'm going to sell you guys all this great componentry, and all you have to do is just put your label on it and sell a different user experience. It might be a situation where PC and Mac share everything, including CPUs and RAM, but the OS is different, and that's what drives the decision of the end customer. Or fit and finish, craftsmanship, design is different, but the internals are the same. Maybe that's the future of the mainstream automotive sector, that there's convergence also in terms of not having to develop your own nuts and bolts for every car. I don't know. It would be a bit of a pity because I like the diversity, but in the name of convergence, I think it kind of makes sense.
But that's exactly what you guys are doing. You guys are able to put your stamp on every single component because you guys don't even use any external suppliers at all. I mean, maybe for like tires and stuff, right?
Hardly, yeah. We even make our own headlights and taillights in the house here. So I've never seen more stuff packed into a small building than I'm seeing here now.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really, really impressive, especially of an outfit that small, that you can actually get by with doing that in-house. I mean, you don't create that many cars, but the fact that you do everything internal is I mean, that's very, very impressive to me. So I mean, okay, going back to the future, right? Because that's something that I really want to discuss with you as well, and I love to delve into that and kind of whip out the crystal ball and see what's going on. And we can definitely get some eye candy while we're doing that. Is if we're looking at some of these products that you've done, like clearly that is a 3-cylinder hybrid with batteries, right? And the packaging in that is quite extraordinary as well because of the location of the batteries and the fact that you were able to keep the hit point low. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that before I get into this other line of questioning, because I think that from a packaging perspective, having batteries within that platform at all is really, really very impressive.
Well, that's something that was, let's say, existing before I joined the company. The package of the car was well defined. The batteries are under the front seat, but not actually impacting the H point of the front driver so much because there's also the feet of the rear passenger going under the H point of the driver. But the whole car is packaged very cleverly to keep the overall height under 1,300, 1,299. For a 4-seat car, this is incredibly low. I mean, we're talking about, what is it, like 12 centimeters under Panamera? That's a sizable difference. That's like,
yeah, wow,
putting this much on top of the
car. Yes, but you get away with that because of innovation. I mean, you're basically using these, really iconic Koenigsegg doors that no one else makes that, push out and then flow up. You have no A pillar. There's also, or B pillar, I should say. is all sorts of, the A-pillars are pushed way back. You've got this like massive kind of wraparound windscreen that's you're able to keep that roofline low just because of the fact that it starts so much further back. And then, I mean, it's really impressive. I mean, I saw some initial images of that where the roofline at the same height? Because it doesn't look that way.
The roofline was on the same height, but we've actually brought the visor a little bit down. Christian wanted more visibility, but we had a bit of an argument about it, and we brought this edge. You see
Yes.
somewhere. Kind of
Okay, I see. Okay.
Brought that down,
And
then
that
we were
really
also
made a
able to
huge
bring.
difference.
Yeah, but we were also able to bring the seat down and the H point down as well, so the visibility didn't change so much. We were able to give more headroom to the driver and the passenger, and balance the glass a little bit better with the body at the same time.
Mm-hmm. No, it's amazing. So, I mean, I know a lot of, speaking about the future of cars, right? And I know that a lot of the guys over at Koenigsegg are driving around in Teslas. I know you're a car guy. You've got a GTR. Tell me, like from a design perspective, to me, design hits all five senses. Is something that I've talked about before. It really is the emotional sensation of, hitting the gas, feeling that power, not only the power, but also the oral, satisfaction, especially if you're, coming out of a GTR, you kind of get that, you know what I'm talking about. So first of all, I know you had like an i30N when you were at Genesis. So you're a guy that likes to drive. You like to get out there and give it some. So for someone like you, working at Koenigsegg makes perfect sense. But so are you one of those guys that has a Tesla company car? And if so, which one do you have?
I have a Model 3. It's not the performance version. It's the twin engine, twin motor, long range version, which is slightly slower, but only slightly slower.
Right.
Still plenty fast. It's a great car to drive if you're in the mood for a quiet but fast drive home.
Yeah.
Christian describes it as a silent cinema, where it's like mimes playing instead of actors. But sometimes you're not in the mood for a lot of noise. Sometimes you just want to make your phone calls and think about I don't know what you're going to do that day on the way to work, and that's a perfect perfect car for that. You can still be incredibly fast and super kind of rude driving that thing. It's slightly too soft for my taste, but it doesn't do anything unpredictable. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of fun to drive that car. But I do have to say, I get into a GTR and I'm just smiling every single chance I get to drive the Nissan. Is hugely rewarding. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing that I think that I would miss the most. And I mean, a lot of automakers, electric car makers are having to devise these artificial sounds, which basically loses a lot of the authenticity of the product.
But it isn't just that. It's also for me, it's the shifting. It's the fact that you're, downshifting into a corner and seeing this thing rev up and pop and bang, and just it's a different kind of visceral experience of being one with a mechanical machine that you don't get from a bunch of torque that comes out of this electric motor. It's fast, it's amazing, and there are days when I actually want to drive the Tesla. Just it feels like after a difficult day, I don't need this now. But on other days, GTR is an event.
Yeah,
for sure.
And sometimes that's what you want. I mean, for me, as someone that loves to drive, I love to get behind the wheel and I love to shift gears and use that clutch pedal, get the heel and toe right into a corner. And you want to be, some of the best cars to drive are ones that come even without power steering, like some of the older models where it really is that visceral experience you're completely in control of because there are no driver aids.
I drove a orange CCXR Koenigsegg for 2 hours last week.
You must have been tired afterwards.
It was incredible. It's a supercharged car. On E85, it makes, I don't know, over 1,000 horsepower, and it's insane how brutal this thing is. It's like go-kart from hell. It's just incredible. But do you want to daily drive that?
No.
Maybe yes. Yes. Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, that's the point, right? So I guess you do need cars as commodities because, you know, you just want to get something that takes you from point A to point B. Maybe that's autonomous or whatever. I mean, this is another thing that I've discussed in the past, and it's like, yes, I think in the future, and you know, you probably have a great opinion of this as well. I think we're going to see autonomous cars coming into the fore because people don't, like you said, they don't want to be bothered, right? They just want to get in the car and commute, and on the way to work, you get something quiet, maybe it drives itself, you can get on the phone or whatever, check Instagram. But there comes a time where I think insurance providers are the ones that are trying to get us into autonomous cars because then they alleviate driver error entirely. At which point, if they get enough driverless cars, enough autonomous vehicles on the roads, then it will be forbidden for anyone that is in control of a vehicle to actually drive besides those vehicles unless you go to like some toll road or whatever and you pay for the privilege. Just like we do now with boats, for example, right? You have to shell out a bunch of money to get a boat because it's a luxury product. You take it out on the ocean, whatever, like, you know, 1 month out of the year, and then you know, the rest of the time it's parked up. So what's your opinion of that? I mean, do you think they'll live side by side?
I'm a really big skeptic that autonomous cars are going to actually happen, but I'm
Right.
glad to be
Okay.
proven wrong.
All right. So that's where you are. You're like, that's not even going.
No. It will happen to a certain extent. I believe that autonomy is already happening as we speak now. But a car without manual controls, what does this actually mean? That when you're trying to drive out of your driveway and there's a constant stream of people crossing the road, an autonomous car basically parks itself for 40 minutes. A person driving a car, not just forward, rolls down the window, waves at someone and says, hey, buddy, can I, you know, and drives past or just makes eye contact. Where is that going to go? So you actually need
Yeah.
some form of rudimentary controls. There's going to be
Yeah.
probably motorways where you have to be fully autonomous, but you turn off the motorway, and as you get closer to your residential area, there's going to be more and more involvement required from the driver to actually get that thing parked at home. I mean, car companies think otherwise, but I'll be gladly proven wrong. I'm going to be happy if there's full autonomous experience that is seamless and without danger and without becoming an obstacle on the road for everybody else in that vehicle. Still far away, in my opinion.
Nice. All right, I'm going to take a couple of questions from the audience now because they are piling up. So, you know, one person is asking here, auto UX design. You were talking about user experience, and he wants to know if there's UX designer on the team. Like, those guys that we met earlier, they're jacks of all trades, but do you have, you know, someone that specifically focuses on UX?
We have a whole department of programmers and embedded team basically that do all the interface work. But design wise, basically it was our guys here. ESA helped a lot on the interface of the Gemera, and I think we still have a lot to learn there and a lot to improve upon, but I think we made a very solid start. So within limited means that we have, where we can't afford a department of experts in the field, we just do a bit of research ourselves, figure out what it is that needs to be done, and do it.
Nice. I want to remind you guys we're talking design here, so I'm not going to talk about, you know, single gear transmissions and things. You know, unless you want to answer that one, you know, it's not really a design question. So let's try to keep it design wise, you know, and design focus. So there's another Wade Poole wants to know, did you work on some aspect of the Jesko Absolute?
Yeah, so when I joined, the regular track version of the Jesko was basically finished, and the Absolute needed a new backend, and Marcello and I together worked on the backend of the Absolute.
All right, nice. Great stuff. So there's someone here, I'm not going to pronounce his name or try to, but he says, thanks for the live, Sasha. Do you think curved lines are actually bullshit, and why?
No, I don't think curved lines are actually bullshit. I just love that meme. It's just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it would have been great if you'd actually said it, but anyway.
Explain yourself. No.
I love that. All right, there's another guy that's coming in, and he wants to know if you have an opinion on the Tesla Cybertruck.
I think it's very cool.
Do you really? All
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah. I think the bravery should be always encouraged, and I think the guys were brave when they did this. And bringing the 70s back or the 80s back is a good thing. Every designer tried to push for a wedge car once or twice in their career, and the bosses said this isn't what market wants. And the wedge cars that we pushed for became soap boxes very quickly and kind of soapy and round. But there's one company that did the ultimate wedge car, and now wedge cars are back in business again. So
Yeah, nice, nice. So going from wedge cars, I want to talk about something that is particularly interesting in the conversations that we've had, and it kind of leads me into another question that Salman Aftab has here. So let me just go into this. One is, I know you're a huge proponent of the digital design process, and you don't ever work in clay. For example, the Gemera was only done in a full-scale foam. So talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, there's one kind of prelude that I want to add in. At one point, I remember we had a conversation, and you were like, I think that the clay, it's like paid promotional advertisement by these clay manufacturers and suppliers that we're seeing it talked about. I mean, I posted something last week about like clay and, its importance or value within the design process on Facebook or, Instagram last week. And it's created this like hotly contested debate. Yeah, it's like super necessary. You only need to, to do forms. I basically, and you can say better than I because you're actually physically in the studio working in the digital tool sets every day. What's your take on this, and how necessary is clay in this day and age right now?
So I first of all, I don't want to be rude to the clay community at all because everything I know from those guys. Like I actually learned by doing those clay models, and that was a vital part of my training as a designer. Was I efficient? No. Was I productive? No. Were those clay models actually any good? No. But they were really good at teaching what works and what doesn't. So I would hate to have been left without this experience. If I had to relive my life, I would have been definitely less of a designer now if I didn't have that clay experience. That was great. However, now looking at the challenges that I have in front of me and the kind of skill set and the tool set that is available to a modern designer, it's a bit strange to do things in this old-fashioned way. First of all, I think a designer is first and foremost, well, of course, a thinker, but when you apply your talent, you're a sculptor. You're not a illustrator, you're not an artist in 2D, you're a sculptor. That is how your ideas materialize in real world. They materialize hopefully as cars or as interiors of cars or as chairs and tables and buildings and whatnot, but those are three-dimensional objects that live in three-dimensional worlds. So for me, I don't understand why modern designers schooling is focused so much on 2D artwork effectively. I mean, you're not drawing a picture of a car for your mom to hang in the bathroom. That's not, that's not the goal of this profession. The goal of this profession is to create objects that people want to use and take pleasure in owning. So I think that building those objects in 3D is a much closer way, is a much truer way of doing it than drawing them. So I've always encouraged people that I worked with, both at Genesis and here at Koenigsegg, to be sculptors, to doodle, sketch, come up with ideas on paper, but translate them into 3D before it's too late.
Yes.
So,
And
and then another point is that Essentia, the Mint, and the Gemera, the three cars that I've been somewhat involved with, and the people I've worked with have done, they were all done by designers, including final surfacing. So the Gemera surfaces are done by designers. There's not a professional alias modeler in that project. Some of the shut lines were cut by professional alias modelers, and some of the part separations have been made, but the actual exterior surfacing is the product of the designer's work. And that is how it should be. If you're outsourcing that part of work to somebody else, then you're effectively just drawing pictures of cars and somebody else is designing them for you.
Right. Right. No, I definitely hear that. I mean, look, you're lucky in that you have a team that can do that, initial napkin sketch, if you will, and then bring it up to a 3D model in Alias. A lot of people don't do that because they just haven't been taught that perhaps in school. They haven't invested the time into learning to develop that skill set. And going back to what you were saying, though, it's like, had you not worked on clay back in the day and developed, your design process through that medium, you probably wouldn't be where you are now. I mean, what do you say to that?
I say to that you're absolutely right. I wouldn't have been where I am now, but with the experience and the know-how that I got from the clay process, I can hopefully transfer it to a newer generation of designers without them having to go through those clay models.
Right.
I can hopefully just transfer what's the gist of it over to them without the trial and error and the pain of doing those clay models.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully,
Right.
let's see. Maybe I'm proven wrong, but the idea is that it should work. And the alias screen, it somehow scares people. They keep trying to learn subdivision and they keep trying to do Maya and polygons and all that other bullshit. It makes no sense. Just
Right.
do the alias models. There's plenty of flexibility there with multi-span, with modern surfacing approaches. You can do whatever you want and keep the format the same for engineers, for the rest of the company, for tooling. Then you're speaking the same language. There's no need to reverse engineer your data. Everything is ping pong, easy peasy.
Right. No, that's a great point, because obviously there's a lot of other programs that are available, like Maya, for example. That's probably a lot easier to get into, than Alias. But then if you do go down that route, then you're not, like you said, speaking the same language with other people that you will have to speak to and communicate with later on down the line. So that's, yeah. I
I
mean,
also hate the fact that the designers always require some kind of a crutch, you know? Oh, it's alias, designers can't do that. Oh, it's CATIA, designers shouldn't be able to do that either. Oh, designers, they just need a bunch of crayons and they just need to be creative and left alone. Oh, more knowledge is bad for designers because the more you know, the less creative you become. That's nonsense. Let's all use the same tools. Let's all be grown-ups about it. Let's drop the mystique of this profession once and for all. There is no mystery here. You're just making stuff in 3D and everybody else is making other stuff in 3D, and together you're building a car. That's all.
yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of questions that are coming in from, like, best suggestions for an aspiring designer and where to go to school and all of that. And I mean, you went to Art Center and maybe you have an opinion on that, but I think if we compound those questions into what's the best advice you can give a student right now, or somebody that's looking to emulate your career path and go down the Sasha Selipanov route, what would you recommend that they kind of do in order to gain entry into that profession and develop themselves as a designer in order to get a job?
I think the worst thing you can do is follow somebody else's example. I think you should follow your own heart and your own dream. And if you want to be a me too somebody else, you're always going to be a me too, and that doesn't really amount to much. So follow your heart, follow your dreams, and if you think that I'm full of crap when I say things that I say, just do them differently and prove me wrong. And it's really, I don't have any real advice except for follow your heart. Whatever feels right is right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's that is probably like, the best advice that you can do. It's just, I guess people are looking for more palatable, if you will, you know, use this model, use that model, stuff like that, right? They're looking for, if you were to learn a program right now, what would you want to learn, type thing.
I don't know. I have no idea. I know that what I'm doing requires this workflow, requires my, alias obsession and using T-shot and whatever. This is just particulars. The point
Yeah.
is, this is just, how do I say? These are the tools that I need to make my dream work. But somebody else might have a totally different dream and might require a totally different set of tools. And I also don't believe in people having exactly the same dreams. I mean, everybody has their own, right?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think, when people start talking about how do I get into automotive design, and then you tell them, well, the first thing, of course, is to have a very good portfolio. Well, how do I develop a good portfolio, or what sketch style should I adopt? And then, a lot of people, they do suggest to kind of trace somebody else's, in the beginning, I suppose, just to kind of get some ideas. And I think that's really bad, because you've got so many people out there that are doing cookie cutter things. One person posts a photo on Instagram, and then you've got like five other accounts posting that same photo, just ripping that guy's content straight off. It's like, get a creative brain, get and start putting your own thought into the content that you're creating. And so that's the way that I'm thinking when I see, you know, other people's portfolios or whatever come through. And let's talk a little bit about that, because I remember.
There's a good point there that you're making.
Yeah.
First of all, I remember Art Center being quite focused on visual presentation of stuff, just quality of sketches, and the reviews were always centered around beautiful drawings and great colors and fantastic composition on the page. And then I went to VW in Germany, and it was a totally different set of priorities. People were actually talking about design and not talking about your ability to draw. And then I remember De Silva saying at some point in time that all he needs is just a pencil sketch. I don't need more. So people were hanging up these giant posters with these Photoshop renderings, and the guy was looking for a very simple doodle that just shows an idea. And I inherited that mindset a lot. I don't care at all about, or I like to not think about sketch styles. That's just decadent, you know. Let's talk about content. Let's, of course, it has to be drawn in a way that is clear what you're talking about. So there's a certain amount of, you know, respect that you do yourself and the others by the quality of your communication skills. But let's not fall in love with communication skills. Let's look at what's actually being communicated. So that's why I think 3D is a good way of doing it, but maybe other people disagree.
No, I mean, I don't think people would disagree. It's like the more, you know, tools you've got in the shed, the better you're going to be able to produce something. I think if you're able, from a portfolio perspective, showcase that you can, you know, sketch a car, you've got creative ideas to impart, and you can also make that transference into 3D, which is, like you said earlier, probably the hardest part, designer, because they, you know, everybody can sketch a side profile.
It's even more than that. The brain is the key, because we were discussing something in the studio. All of a sudden, Essa comes up and says, "Well, I figured out a way with some fancy code that I downloaded off of internet to reduce the number of frames we need to render from 30 to 15, and then to speed that up to 60. And you won't see a difference. It looks hyper smooth in the animation, but it's actually this bit of code that extrapolates using machine learning your frames. So the guy isn't a programmer, but he has a brain. So he comes up with ideas that are relevant and is not strictly limited by his job title of a sketch monkey. You know, that's not what we're hiring people for, and that's not what we're all trying to be in our life, right? Sketch monkeys.
Right.
That's what I value in the team, is that they are multi-talented, curious, and smart.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's what you need, right? Because you need to constantly expand your knowledge base. If you're not curious, you're not going to look to do things differently. You're going to stay in one place, and then you're going to stay stagnant. And for a designer, that's just horrible, right? Because you need to be constantly learning. You need to be constantly on your toes, coming up with innovative solutions, developing things. So most definitely, I mean, that's very good advice. So people get held up a lot on the way that, you know, the process and the way that things go, and it's because they don't know how to do it and how it's done. But it's pretty, I mean, it's pretty simple from my perspective, right? It's like, you know, you get a Wacom tablet after your initial kind of, you know, sketch that you've done at the bar, you just kind of get on that, and right, and then you just kind of progress. I mean, if you want to entertain or enlighten these guys on the exact process, but it's up to you if you want to do that or not.
The exact process is very simple. Just keep a sketchbook, keep sketching in that sketchbook. If you find a theme that you think is promising, build it up in 3D, look at it from different angles. If it works, great. If it doesn't, throw it away, continue looking, continue searching. The only way you validate a theme is by building it in 3D. And sometimes a theme is not even a graphic theme. It's a volume idea, or it's a shape change, shape shift idea that needs to be tried in 3D and see how that works. Ultimately, 3D is the truth, and 2D is a crutch.
Okay. That's a great point to move on to the next bit of more discussion, which is, and I hope we have enough time for this, but I did want to speak with you about, you know, obviously we're in this current situation right now, which is, you know, Sweden wasn't particularly affected. I know that you continued going to work during all of this time, and you went to the studio and all of that, and you know, you just kept your distance from other members of the team, which with 6-7 people isn't that hard to do. I mean, I don't know the space that you have, but
No, we interfaced with the whole company, but we did try to be smart about it.
right. So in that kind of environment, when you're looking at what's happening, and you kind of talked about clay modeling and things briefly. We talked about that. I mean, these guys are particularly hard hit during this pandemic because they can't go in there and physically work on a model, right? But in terms of perhaps lessons learned, if you will, coming out of this, and looking at the future of design, and perhaps of Koenigsegg, but perhaps more generally automotive speaking, where do you see this going? Where do you see kind of what is going to be the future of design, automotive design in particular?
And this is in relation with or regarding coronavirus and the situation we live in now, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of companies, like for example, since the start of this year, there was all these companies combating, or rather, facing issues of, electrification and autonomy more on the future, but they're having to kind of rebrand themselves, or they're having to reposition essentially. Um, Perhaps what their goals were in the past, with hiring on a bunch of electrical engineers to develop these new platforms and moving into that way, and then so designers aren't really sought after at the moment because there's companies that need to invest in other areas. So I guess in the future, after this coronavirus thing, now we're seeing another shift, right? Because who's going to want to share vehicles in the immediate future, right? It's all about personal transportation. I don't want to get on a bus. I'll take my bike like the 13 miles. You know what I mean? So it's that already is like creating this I guess paradigm shift, if you will, even if it's only temporary. What do you see in terms of where you are in Koenigsegg is, and perhaps the greater automotive industry, to be the future of automotive design, or of products, or of mobility?
Look, I don't know. This is it probably takes a very different type of person to answer this question with any level of confidence. The only thing I can say is that we try to be raw design stands for something, right? It's the idea that we try to strip the process down to its very basics, and we try to be without waste, and just straight to the point. And this has to do with efficiency. We did an entire car in 4 months with panel engineering and homologation and all that stuff. So that sets the bar pretty high as far as efficiency is concerned. And I hope that by doing our best, we stay relevant. That's all I can say to that, just doing our best, trying to be innovative, frugal, and effective, but on the other hand, emotional and passionate. And then hopefully that's enough to stay relevant.
Well, see, that's the thing that I was getting on. It's like, I guess we spoke about this earlier a little bit as well. It's like the whole car as a commodity thing, because obviously you're creating hypercars, very limited edition hypercars that are really geared towards the the individual that really wants to drive, have a beautiful car, be noticed, spend a boatload of money. But it's very different in terms of what the typical customer, I suppose, would want. So I guess that's why I was thinking.
Yeah, but think about it, Eric. I mean, if you think about bigger car companies, who wouldn't benefit from a more cost-effective, straighter to the point, less wasteful process? Who wouldn't? Every company would. It doesn't depend on the size of the company. If you could say you're spending, I don't know, an X amount, you could be spending a tenth of that, and you're spending 3 years, you could be spending a sixth of that. But you still would have a product that is actually better quality, because it was designed digitally throughout from the beginning, and things actually fit. So who would say no to that? I mean, which company would say no to that? It doesn't matter that we're working on hypercars for an exclusive customer or not. This basics of design process we're talking about. Efficiency is something that applies not just to design, but to every person's life and work. And I think there's huge benefits to be made, and rewards to be reaped off of efficiency.
Yeah, I guess where I was getting at with that is, do you think perhaps, looking in the future, what do you foresee as being, perhaps this has shifted people's mentality. I mean, we're going through a lot of stuff right now. 2020 has been no joke, right? We're going through a lot of reflective times, right? I think that we're looking at people being at home, realizing the value of being with their family all the time. They're perhaps work isn't their priority as it once was. Perhaps their mindset is now shifting into other things. Perhaps they're realizing that, again, coming back to my watch analogy, they don't need the Rolex. They don't, maybe the Casio is sufficient. Maybe being at home and being with your family is worth a 30 grand, cut in your salary. I don't know. Something like that. I mean, do you foresee anything like that happening? I mean, at the moment, you are still selling and delivering vehicles, as far as I know, right? Koenigsegg. So, but, you're probably doing that from a distance.
I don't foresee any lasting change because people are people. You live only once, and you want to live that life doing what you want to do. And I love my family. I spend plenty of time with them. I'm barely ever late from work. I'm trying to be very disciplined about the way I actually distribute my working hours versus family time. I don't think that these things are directly opposing each other. I'm also trying to achieve as much as I can in my career whilst remaining a family man. So those are not the opposite sides. They don't have to fight. They can coexist. And people are people. They want to enjoy life. What I mean by that is you don't want to go on some kind of a how do I say hiatus from exciting things. You don't want to just say from now on. I don't care for Rolex. I mean, like I don't have a watch, so I don't care about Rolex. But if Rolex is your thing, you can carry on saying Casio is good enough for a couple of weeks, and then you'll be like, damn it, where's my Rolex? So.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. If you're used to a certain thing, I was just, I mean, right now, there's never been more hypercars than the time that we're living in right now. It's like,
Perfect.
and which is great. I mean, there's this huge polarization in the industry, I think, from hyper exclusive hypercars. And I mean, you're actually very lucky in that you have a very unique offering now with the Gemera, because there's nothing like that at all. Like it's the first ever 4-seat, 4-passenger, like full on comfortable
and green
hypercar in the world ever created, right?
And green and socially and environmentally responsible.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing as well. It's like, most people when they're buying a hypercar, they want a V10 or they want a V12 or whatever. This is actually, forget about the powertrain as well. If you just look at the design process, you guys, for example, there is no leather, there's no animals being killed in your design. I mean, it's very Swedish. Talk to me a little bit about the Koenigsegg design language, because this is something that we're seeing back in, from the CC, which was what, 1994, like 96, like mid 90s, right?
4, yeah.
It
4
was
was
like,
the idea, then 6 was the car, and then 2000 was the debut at the motor show. So it kind of took a few steps to get the car into the market. But the idea is it's kind of a reflection of Christian and his thinking. Everything has a reason, everything has logic, and everything is done for a good rational reasons. And the position of the A-pillars, this wraparound glass, the doors that have tiny footprint when they open, so you can park the car as close as you want to other vehicles and still get in and out. The I don't know, cup holders in the car, just all of it. The entire story is based around functionality, and the aesthetic beauty, hopefully, something that is a consequence of cleverly thought through packaging decisions and functional thoughts. Aerodynamics play a huge role. I mean, all these things play a role for every company, but there's something uniquely Swedish about the way things are done here. So almost, I don't know, for lack of a better word, modest. There is no, I don't want to scream at the whole world about things that you do. You just do them quietly and do them best.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. No, that's beautiful. Now we got 2 minutes on the clock, so I just have one final question, I suppose, and that is,
the exhaust next to the glass is fantastically logical, much shorter piping, far better performance, makes all kinds of sense to put it there instead of routing it through the actually luggage compartment of the vehicle and through your bags. So, nice and easy to comment, but we've thought of things.
I mean, look, there's a lot of rational decision, but it looks so logical. Yes, it does. So no, there was one question that came in, and that was one that I'd like to end on. And you got 1 minute. So, do you think car design should be like traditional car design, being schools, should be archived for online learning? Because you can learn a lot of the things that you've just talked about in terms of programs and learning online.
I would hate for that to happen. I benefited hugely from meeting people and making personal connections and bonds with them. And after school, some of the instructors would say, "Come on, it's happy hour somewhere. Let's go grab a burger." And then you would be out with them discussing design, and that level of friendship and camaraderie and to an extent intimacy would be gone. So I don't think that's a good idea.
I appreciate that. I strive on that myself. So anyway, it's great to connect with you again, Sasha. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully we'll catch up again at some point. But hopefully the guys watching this, thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully you gained something from this conversation. And tune in for the next one.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Take care, Sasha.
Bye,
Cheers,
guys.
brother. Bye-bye.